Welcome to A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. I'm Anton van Ben. This is a podcast about starting over. It is about what it takes to leave the familiar behind and the courage it takes to begin again in a land that isn't yet home. Together with my co-host Ben Liebenberg, we explore the untold stories of migration. Not just where people went, but why they left, what they held on to, and what they've had to let go. Each episode, we sit down with someone who's made that leap. Someone who's left behind not just places, but languages, careers, communities, and sometimes even parts of themselves. They share what called them forward, what nearly held them back, and what they've come to understand about identity, belonging, and starting again. Produced in partnership with Southern Crossings, a community for South Africans forging new lives in Australia, this podcast is a place to feel seen, heard, and understood. Because this isn't just about visas or paperwork. It's about identity, loss, hope, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life piece by piece. So wherever you are on your journey, arriving, settling, or still thinking about it, welcome. This is where stories connect us all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This information to customers travelling on the land airways. Flight LA 800 President Qantas 321 service to Auckland and Santiago.
Welcome to A Stranger, a Suitcase and a Story. And this podcast is where we unpack the real stories of migration, identity, and belonging. And whether you've made the leap or thinking about it or simply curious, you're in the right place. And today, we're joined by a real special guest all the way. Well, I say all the way because we're in Australia, and so it's all the way to America, to Arizona. And we're joined by Tania Wilson, which has an amazing story and is going to share that with us. So Tania grew up or was born in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal, which is known as it is now, and then emigrated to California in 1994, which Tania is a long time ago, and lived there. And so she's obviously been there for 30 years, and she's now living in Phoenix, Arizona. So Tania is the author also of The Secrets We Keep, Spilling the Beans. And that's really how I got to meet Tania. I mean, it's not like I know Tania. And so I was on social media, like Ben, like our age people do that nowadays. And so we were on social media, and I saw Tania was talking about a book there, and she emigrated to the US. And I said, well, she's the perfect guest for us. I am sure of that. And I connected with her, and she said yes. And so this memoir that she wrote traces a journey from childhood marked by tragedy and silence in South Africa to in reinvention in the United States. And with candor and quiet wit, she explores grief, resilience, and the radical relief of truth-telling. And so truth-telling is very much about storytelling, Ben, which is what we're all about. So now, living in Arizona, she devotes herself to writing and embraces the adventures of desert lifestyle, finding community, trying new things, and adjusting to life, where the nearest ocean is a 3.5-hour drive away from Mexico. So Ben, before I ask Tania to say something, it's very exciting to have her here, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, really looking forward to this. Really, curious to find out the story. Really good that we've got somebody from America on board, and it will be interesting to, see how that differs, or maybe it might be the same as what we've gone through, and, take the lessons from it. So yeah, looking forward to today.
So Tania, finally, it's your chance. Welcome, and really stoked to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's a real honor to be here.
Yeah, and I think that it's always interesting when I reach out to people that we don't know, because it's one thing getting people on the podcast that we know, but most often Ben and Tania, the people that we get on, we don't know, and I'm so grateful that you said yes, because we'd love to hear your story, because we're similar ages and grew up in a South Africa that we all knew. So Ben, do you want to start for us?
I want our guests to start, and we always kick off and go right back and where you were born and growing up and life as a kid and what it's like. So yeah, maybe you can lead us off and tell us a little bit about young Tania in Durban and what was it all about.
Yes, so as you will know, I was born in Durban, and due to my dad's sales job, he was working his way through the ranks, so we had to kind of move around a lot. So it was Durban, Pietermaritzburg, then it was Hilton, and then back to Durban. So it was quite hard on the kids, new schools and, saying goodbye to friends you had just made, that kind of thing. But we finally put our roots down in Umhlanga, where, the family home still is today. I always wanted to be a teacher. I do suspect my grades weren't the best, but anyway, in South Africa in those days, I think women were viewed more as homemakers. So my dad was not with me on the idea that I'd go to college and study to be a teacher. So he actually bought me a correspondence course to become a travel agent. So in complete defiance, I didn't open one book. So then I decided, well, I got to go get a job in the city, Durban city, and I took on a couple of lower level entry jobs just to get my bearings. And then eventually I was hired by NBS, which Natal Building Society back in those days. I worked in the mortgage department. I worked around the entire department, new registrations, cancellations, dormant loans, you name it. And based on that, I was promoted to the head office, which had a development company called NBS Developments, and they owned tracts of land all over South Africa. Obviously, we were focused with Natal, and I morphed into the job of becoming a sales/marketing consultant. So what I would do for them, my job was to sell houses off plan to the Indian community as first-time home buyers. And it was really a great job, and I was stationed out in makeshift show houses in Tonga.
If I can interrupt you there, what year was that, Tania?
So
that must have been in the 80s, right? Early 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, early 80s, yeah, because I graduated in 79, yes. So it was still the time of the Group Areas Act.
Yes.
So obviously, we had to limit the folks that we were selling to. In this case, their market was the Indian community. So, we worked out in the townships, selling houses. It was a great job. I loved it, just helping people get into their first homes. And of course, my knowledge of the mortgage industry was really helpful in taking folks from the beginning through to getting them into their houses. So that was my job. I did that with them for at least 13 years. And then when I turned 30, I had an opportunity to come to the States. So it was around the time when a lot of families were packing up and leaving. And I just couldn't understand why people were going. I mean, it just, South Africa was beautiful with our climate and our beaches. And I was like, I'm not going to go, I'm going to stay. And there we go. Life had different plans for me. And I had this opportunity, and I decided, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back, right? That's what I told myself.
So Tania, maybe I can take you a little bit back if you don't mind. We'd love to hear about your decision to come to or to go to the US. But maybe if you are so inclined, talk to us a little bit about your childhood. How was it like growing up in Durban? Where did you go to school? That sort of thing. Because I personally stayed in Durban for a few years. I loved the weather. It was really nice. It's because I was born in Bloemfontein or stayed in Joburg for most of my life as a kid, winter was real winter. Durban, it isn't. It's the coldest it gets there is probably 6 or 7 degrees. So how was it like growing up as a kid?
I have a lot of like really great memories of being young and wild and rebellious. What really stands out in my mind the most was the time we lived in Hilton, just outside Pietermaritzburg. And there we still had dirt roads and, we never used to wear shoes. We had a forest opposite our house, which was quite dense, and it had a marsh with sinking sand.
Yeah.
And my brother and I, we were little devils. We'd go into the forest and then play these games and actually put our feet in the sinking sand. And when it got to a certain level, we'd be like, okay, get out, get out. So it was a very wild kind of life. And there was a down the street, and we used to go and get on the train tracks, and we knew the train schedule, and we'd hear it coming, and we'd be standing on the tracks and wait till the last minute before jumping off. I mean, I think if my folks knew what we kids were up to, we wouldn't have had so much freedom.
Yes.
So it was a very relaxed and just a really fun childhood back in those days. There was no cell phones and things like that. I went to school in Pietermaritzburg to Athlone Primary. It was fun. I don't think they liked me that much at the school. I brought a snake to school one day and it escaped, and the school had to be evacuated. And yeah, I always seemed to be in a lot of trouble.
So where do you get that rebellious nature from? Do you know?
No, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was the fact that all us kids have red hair, bright red hair. Maybe not now, but all three kids had freckles and red hair. Our mother was from the UK, and she had bright red hair as well. My dad was South African. So I don't know, that mix of English and South African blood. But yeah, I have very fond memories, and I do go through them. I use them as kind of timestamps in my book. I go through my earlier childhood and kind of how my parents met, way back then, and yeah.
So what do you think were the things that shaped you and made you that you can remember from those times, significant things that you think played a role growing up and just shaped your thinking later years and what you did in immigrating and those kind of things?
So, I have this philosophy that you can't outrun your past. And, sadly, in my lifetime, we did have a family tragedy, which has kind of followed me. And it has made me realize, that telling the truth, being honest is critically important. You can't outrun your past, and with your theme, with the suitcase coming and immigrating, I think, well, I didn't pack a suitcase, I packed a trunk. So my childhood shaped the woman that I am today. I went through a lot, and, it is all there in the book for those inclined to read it. But yes, I sometimes wonder if certain things hadn't happened, who would I be today? Would I be this person? And those are things you'll never know the answers to. But I just believe in honesty and integrity and, being a good human.
Yes. And I think you're right. I think as we grow up and so, there are many things that happen in our childhood that kind of shapes us, and some are really hard, and some are, great things that you remember. I mean, we all have those. And I think that, so when you started working, your father wanted you to do a certain thing. You wanted to do something else, but from what I hear you say, ending it in NBS or NBS, you said?
Yeah.
And you became a salesperson anyway, right? It's what I wanted you to become, and there you did.
I guess so.
It's a funny thing, and some of I think, Ben, it was another episode that you talked about, when somebody says that, I think it was one of our previous episodes where at the time there was very limited type of careers, doctor or an architect or a lawyer or an accountant, and then
School teacher.
yeah, and then you made the point to say, well, we often become what our parents were, right? Yeah. So Tania, and I think that probably, I mean, you can't deny the gene. So you were probably a really good salesperson, right?
I guess so, because, I'm not ruthless. Actually, people trusted me because they knew I wasn't just all hype,
Yes.
I really cared about them and getting them the best deal and, into a house that suited their family and their pocket. So I guess, yes, it probably does come naturally, but it's more working with the people that gave me that real, that good feeling about my job.
Yeah, and before we go overseas, I was sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking, that's not often that you get the opportunity to read somebody else's book. Now you've taken the trouble to write that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And at the end of the episode, I think that what we must do is to ask you the question then, not now, but ask you the question then where people can get the book and that sort of thing. So, but I think what you don't always get is the opportunity to hear a little bit more about the person behind the book. And so you kind of said, yeah, honesty, integrity. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about who Tania is? What drives you? What are the things that excite you? What are the things that you live for every day when you wake up and you say, well, this is the part that I like about me? What is that?
Well, I'm retired now, so I'm into my third year of retirement. So obviously my mind is less cluttered. My daughter is a young adult, so I've always loved writing. That was my favorite thing at school. And I always hoped I could do something with it. I felt, I think everyone is given a God-given talent, and a lot of us never get to use it. And it just felt like such a shame to me that I have wasted this talent, but I always was hopeful. And sure enough, when I moved to Arizona, I live in a very nice, thriving 55-plus community. I discovered they had a writing club. So, I'm looking to fill my hours as a retiree, and I went there armed with a bundle of poems that I'd written over the years, and that, the people in the group, I mean, they publish, they playwrights, and, I thought, well, I'm really out of my depth here. But they worked with me to create the story, and it was amazing, just the inspiration. And so it's just like the gift returned, and I would wake up in the night and I would have ideas flowing through my head. I'd actually have to get up and go and write things down so that I could pick it up again in the morning. Otherwise I'd never get any sleep. So, and that's what excites me. That's what makes me happy. And just writing is what I love to do. I fill my days just writing and seeing things maybe differently to other people and putting it into words. And, readers come to me now and they're like, I really liked your book, and I really identified, that happened to me as well. And if that's all that comes out of it, then I've achieved my goal. I want people to know, yes, it's hard to immigrate. Those first few years, especially the first 5, are really, really hard.
Well, let's talk about that. It's a good segue. Yeah. And so if I can just guide the conversation or just make the comment, it's a side comment that, you've been in the US for 30 years. We talk to you and you sound like us. You're very South African. So it's not, you don't sound American. And so this is the thing about South Africans immigrating, So tell us about Your decision to go, you said it was early 94, right?
Yes, 94.
And I think you said you had an opportunity to go and you didn't quite understand why people went. But so what was that opportunity for you?
It was a man.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So
we-
I met someone who was a naturalized American citizen, obviously originally from South Africa. And he was desperate to go back to the States. And he was like, come with me, come with me. And I'm like, well, I can't just pack up and leave. And, you know, you need to take me there and show me the place. So
Yeah.
fair enough. We came to the States one December, arrived in New York to a really wild snowstorm, but not the best time of year to travel over here. And we visited Seattle, California. We went to Florida, spent time in New Jersey, and basically the choice was given to me. Where would you like to live? And at the time, I didn't know that California was obviously the most expensive place I could have chosen, but it was certainly the most similar to my life back in Durban. From the climate, it was the closest. And it just felt right. And seeing those homes with no burglar guards and electrified fences, I couldn't believe that people actually lived like that. So I came back to South Africa and quit my job, sold my apartment, broke the news to my heartbroken mom and dad, and just thought, let me just take the plunge. As I said, if I didn't like it, I could always come back.
Yeah, so let's, we always ask the people, you said you didn't have a suitcase because we always ask our guests what was in their suitcase and what did they take with them. You said you had a trunk, and I suppose that suitcase is both physically that we always ask them, but also just emotionally, you know, what did you have in your suitcase that you took with you, but also what did you leave behind in South Africa? What were the things you just said to your mom and dad? What were the things that was really tough back in that suitcase?
Yeah, I came across with five suitcases. That was it. I mean, I sold everything else. I gave away my vinyl records, which I'm really sorry about because, you know, they've come back into fashion and they would have probably been worth something today.
Springbok hits, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
No, I think I was a little more sophisticated than that. But yeah, just mainly clothing, a couple of mementos, you know, photos in a frame, just ready to start over, have a fresh start and see where it went. I didn't have a job lined up. You know, I was just basically taking a chance.
So,
And emotionally, so what are the things that you left behind there? What were the things that you thought, well, okay, I'm walking away from this?
The hardest thing for me was leaving my parents. My brother was in South Africa at the time still with his wife. So it was saying goodbye to him as well, and my mom and dad. That was incredibly difficult. I felt a lot of guilt as well that I'd never been far away from my parents ever. I mean, you know, I used to, even when I moved out of the house, I mean, we would, you know, see each other a couple of times during the week or pick up the phone. And all of that was just gone because there was nothing like that in 1994. There was no internet. The long distance calls were horrifically expensive. We had fax machines. So, you know, every week I would type my mother a long letter about everything I did and fax it off to her, and she would do the same on her side. But yeah, that really hit me the most. You know, hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done it if I'd known how hard it would be.
what do you mean? You say hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done it. What do you mean by that?
Well, the 30 years that I spent in California, I spent most of that time with my feet back in South Africa. I found it imperative to visit my parents a lot. So instead of maybe exploring the US, I would use all my vacation time and fly back to South Africa to spend time with my family. Yeah,
But I suppose, Tanya, you're not unique in that one. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people we speak to, including ourselves, we go through that as well, that especially in the first years I've been in Australia, about 25 years now, and it gets a bit more drawn out, but certainly in the beginning, we had our children born here, etc. So you feel the need to at least go back and connect with the family over there, not just for their sake, but also for your kids' sake.
yes.
And it was the same thing, you spend a lot of, you only got X amount of weeks a year that you've got leave. And you also only got X amount of money that you can spend per year. And, you find that most of that just gets spent to go back to South Africa. And you go, oh, gee, it would have been cheaper just to work there and then go on holiday,
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I really thought coming to the States would be easy. I mean, the language was English. I thought it would be easy, but my goodness, the integration that we had to go through. I mean, just in simple things, like in California especially, a lot of the streets and cities have Spanish names, and you're just expected to know how to pronounce them. So one of my favorites, which everyone got a good laugh out of, it's a town called La Jolla, okay? And that's with a Jolla at the end. So Americans call it La Jolla, the J becomes a H, and I called it La Jolla. Yeah, I'm going to La Jolla. So, I mean, people had a lot of laughs at my expense, but I think the best one was I was working at an entry-level job as a receptionist, and I had to make announcements over the PA system to the entire office. And I was handed a message for Jesus. And I said, Jesus, come and get your message from the front office. And everyone just packed up in the back. I mean, you say Jesus, not Jesus, but nobody told me. I mean, I think that was part of the fun for them, seeing what I would mess up next, or call somewhere Temecula instead of Temecula. But, I take all those things in my stride. It's a bit of a learning curve and part of the adventure. I don't know if, in Australia you've come across similar kind of things, but it's very prevalent here.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, excuse me. In Australia, the way people joke with each other is very different than in South Africa in that sense. In Australia, they call it banter. And it's a bit different because South Africans are far more direct. And so when you tell a joke, it's pretty direct. And in Australia, it's a little bit different. And you've got to get used to the humor here. So tell us a little bit about, the thing is that unless you know America or been there a couple of times and know the country a bit or traveled there a bit, the only thing that you see about America is whatever the news channels present to you, which is an awful picture, right? And in that sense, it's so divided. That's what you see. It's just like hard and so on. But we know that's not true about America. I mean, there's much more about America than what Fox News or CNN or anybody else is telling you. So tell us a little bit about the difference between being a South African and being in America. What was the things that you found similar? What was the things that you found different?
Okay. Well, my first job in California was actually illegal, because I hadn't got married, but I didn't really know how to file my green card paperwork, and it was something I was going to have to do myself. I didn't have an immigration attorney or anything like that. So I accepted this job at this local coffee shop, and under the table, cash under the table. So I used to have to get there by 4:30 a.m. in the morning, and I would ride my bicycle down there in the dark, start brewing all the coffees. And I mean, I just couldn't believe how many different types of coffees there were. I mean, in South Africa, coffee was just coffee back then. I don't know about now, but there's vanilla, there's hazelnut. And let me tell you, brewing Amaretto coffee at 4:30 in the morning, it was enough to make me gag. But anyway, so that was like one of the first things, like, wow, bigger and better in America, all these different coffees. And then they put me behind the counter, and people would come in and they'd ask for their drinks. And I was just like slapped in the face. It was like, I want half skim milk, a shot of this and this, it was just mind-boggling. And then cappuccinos, double froth. I mean, I couldn't even get the froth right in the single cappuccino. But all these different types of coffees. And then the local sheriffs would stop by. And that was my cue to kind of go wash dishes in the back because, my knees started shaking. But I decided to leave that job when the owner took me aside one day and said his brother would like me to become his mistress. So to me, come to America.
Tania, can you imagine that? No,
they knew I was married, but I was like, time to go. So that was the end of the coffee shop, but I was never really any good at it.
I must say, I can relate to that. First time I went to the States, I can't remember what year it was in the 80s or early 90s or something. And that's the first time somebody asked me, breakfast, how do I want my eggs? And I was like, what do you mean? I've never heard of anybody ask you. Then I've heard about over easy and all these terms, and I didn't know what they were talking about, so I had to find out.
It's like a code language. And then, what is the other one? Yes, when on the California freeways, you'd hear talk of there's a SIG alert on the 405. And it's like, what is the SIG alert? It doesn't mean there's a cigarette or smoke alert. It turns out it meant there was an incident on the freeway. So that's the SIG alert. And then, there's just so many little things you have to get used to. But, the other one of my favorites was going into the supermarket for the first time, okay? I actually had a complete anxiety attack and left with nothing. I went down the bread aisle and I just wanted bread, okay? White or brown? But no, there is multi-grain, there's sourdough, there's cornbread, potato bread. I was like, and then I tried my luck down the dairy aisle, and that was even worse. Just half and half, rice milk, soy milk. I just wanted whole milk. And as I say, I walked out of there with nothing. I'm like, never going to get used to this place.
I can relate to that, Tania. It's you say this, I haven't thought about it for forever, but I remember when we first went to Southeast Asia and we stayed in Thailand for a few years before we stayed in China, and those first kind of few weeks when you want to do something that you think is pretty basic, and that's to buy food, is the most daunting task. I mean, you say America, it's like, it should be the same, or even Australia, it should be the same. It looks the same, but it's not. You go into those aisles, you get completely confused. You just want to buy groceries. It's not a hard thing. And then, obviously in Southeast Asia, that's a little bit harder because, looking for Western products and so on. But still, it's the same thing, right? And sometimes we forget, once we've settled in a country, how hard it was in the beginning just to buy food, never mind anything else.
Definitely. But one of my favorites, and in fact, that happened to me just the other day in a restaurant, and you'd think I would know these things by now, but the waiter approached me and he said, "Ma'am, can I get you something to drink?" So I said, "Oh, I'd love some water, please." And he looked at me and he's like, "I'm sorry, we don't have that here." And then I realized he didn't understand what I'm saying. So then I said it in the American drawl, "Could I have some water, please?" Oh, then he was happy, and then I was hydrated. It's just like, what is so hard about the way I talk?
Yeah.
But, the Americans also love the accent. And sometimes I feel like it must be like what being a celebrity is like. You can't blend in with an accent like the South African accent. They pick you out right away, and it's, "Oh, I love your accent." where are you from? And then the guessing game starts. It's normally New Zealand and Australia. It's never South Africa, or very rarely, unless they knew a South African. So that's my fun is the game. Are they going to get it right this time?
Yeah, and I did find the Americans being actually very receptive and very inquisitive, when you got a strange accent, and they were actually very engaging. And I wanted to ask you about the people side of it. We've got all these practicalities and making a life, but what was it like finding a home and friends and a community?
Well, that brings me back to, in South Africa, we're such a friendly people. Like, you didn't have to have set date. You could just pop around to somebody's house for tea or a drink or whatever. Here, it's slightly harder to get integrated and start getting those kind of invitations. So I was like, I wonder why that is. Maybe the best I could come up with, well, maybe it's because we don't have any domestic help here. So you can't just say, oh, come on over. You've got to go and see what your house looks like first. But I found that through working, I did start to make friends. I did connect up with other South Africans that were already over here that I didn't necessarily know from home. And we would get together and have a braai. And, one of them made biltong and the other had made boerewors. And, we would just have a whole little South African afternoon. But, I've had to adapt to a lot of their customs and way of life. But I never forget where I came from. We do Thanksgiving here, which is a holiday we've never celebrated or never will celebrate back in South Africa. And, all these kind of traditions and things that we've had to jump in and go along with it. You're here, do you want to fit in, or the alternative, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say this because it's the thing that we find when we speak to people on this podcast. Ben and I see this always, is that the people that are successful, that are able to stay, and you are obviously one of them because you've been there for 30 years, in the sense that you made it work, was people who remembered where they come from, but also embraced where they are, in the sense that, if you just spend your time trying to find South Africans, it will be really hard. But if you embrace that, your new country as well, and their habits and their things that are important to them, and celebrate that as well, I suppose that's how you settle, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, it definitely takes time to adjust. And I would say almost to the day, when 5 years had elapsed, I realized that I had put down roots. I had a circle of friends. I had a new doctor and dentist, and and it had gotten easier, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's very common to people that we speak to. Mostly we speak to people coming to Australia, but there's so many similarities there, and that time frame is interesting. Obviously there's some people it's a little bit quicker, but generally, yeah, that's the same time frame, even though you think it's going to be quick and easy, it takes time to really just, I suppose settle down and find your roots again.
I think it should be easier these days. I would imagine for a young person, say, immigrating to Australia, just based on the progress that has been made with technology, because, like when I came in 94, there was no such thing as Google Maps. We had Yahoo Maps, which we'd print out and be driving somewhere where you don't even know where you're going, and it's turn left, turn right, and then you get somewhere and it's like it was supposed to be a school, but it's a tire store. And that kind of anxiety, driving where you don't know where you're going. Whereas now we've got, Siri, and it's like, turn left, go past those lights. Those kind of developments must definitely make it easier for folks settling into a new country.
Yes, it does, and it's probably true because it's easier to speak to people across the border and so on. But Tanya, what we find when we speak to people, it's those things are as you grow up and as technology improves, you take all of those things for granted. The things that people really struggle with is leaving people behind, talking to people there, not being in your own community, forging a new community, missing things, and that sort of thing. We touched on that earlier, and I could sense it's an emotive part for you, and that's the thing that was hard for you to say, I'm an American, because you had such strong roots still in South Africa, right, with your parents. Isn't that right?
Yes, yes, I did. And I mean, I really tried very hard to return to South Africa many times. But, with the custody arrangement with my ex-husband, you can't just uproot a child from the country that they're born in, and go back to South Africa. So that probably was what really kept me here all this time.
So you were, from what I hear you saying, or interpreting rather, is that you would often think about returning to South Africa?
Yes, yes. It's just, when I visit South Africa, I blend in immediately because I sound like everyone else. I don't have to explain what I'm saying. They understand. They understand my jokes, and I blend in, and, it takes me a day or so, but I'm back to saying how's it and yeses and, all that. It doesn't take me long to get back into the life there. But when I'm there, it's just, yeah, I love South Africa. I'm always going to love it. It's always going to be in my blood, in my heart. But I would say now that both my parents have passed on, and my brother now lives in Texas, I don't really have a valid reason to go back anymore, other than some really good friends that I still have there. But, maybe it is time for me to start exploring other countries and places now that things have been wrapped up over there.
Yeah. And I think one finds the reasons as you go along. Why you stay or why you go back, or stuff like that. And it's hard. Myself, I've got, my mother is still alive. She's in South Africa. I've got three sisters. They're in South Africa, and there are things that you miss, but then there are so many compelling other things that make you stay. And then you just realize that immigration, somebody else said in one of the pods, I think Benny said, I think it was Ryan who said that immigration is not for sissies, right? And it's true. It's hard. There are things that you come from in South Africa that's so easy for you to do and experience, and you know what to do. And then, of course, in your new country, it's not the same. But then there are things that keep you here. For me, it's my family. My family is here now, and my wife.
Yes.
My son, he's married. I've got a grandchild. I'm not going anywhere, Tania.
I don't blame you.
So for you, Tania, what are the things that, let's flip the script a little bit. What are the things that you really enjoyed, and what are the things that you thought is really good about your new home?
In America, okay. Well, I mean, I have to confess that we still do a lot of South African things. We have rugby parties. We all, dress up and put on those Springbok rugby jerseys, and we sing the anthem when it comes on. But I must confess, I don't know all the words anymore. But I enjoy following the rugby still. I enjoy cooking, and in particular, I love curries. I love Indian food. So I get my spices from South Africa. They're all genuine, and I'm kind of known as the curry queen, and I have a large following over here. I'm known for my dinner parties. So I love entertaining and having friends over, not just South Africans. My American friends love the South African cuisine. We put it all on. We get Mrs. Ball's chutney and naan, and, we make it as authentic as possible.
What is that? Is that curry in the bread? What do you call it?
Oh, the bunny chow?
Yes. Have you made it for people there?
I haven't, because I can't get that bread. You've got to get that like big loaf and cut it in half and then hollow it out. I don't even think, all the bread here seems to be sliced. So go figure. But
That's
I
true.
guess
You don't know
if
that.
I make my own bread,
Yeah,
Maybe I should make my own bread, and then
yeah, it is.
and then I could do a bunny chow. But
Well, that's a good challenge for you because that, nobody would ever understand that, but it is so cool when you have that.
well, I mean, I have to say, if I post like a meme or something about, a bunny chow, I always have to say no bunnies were harmed in the making of this meme, because immediately people, they assume the worst.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, just to digress quickly, Anton, Willem, which is Anton's brother-in-law, also lives in Newcastle here in Australia. He's actually made us some bunny chow at his house before. When we came here, it was absolutely fantastic, and everybody loved it, including the Australians, So, yep, Tania, there's a good idea.
Yeah. That's very
My claim
unique.
to fame.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's very unique. The other thing that you said earlier, and Benny asked you the question, so what do you love doing there? And I think is also the opportunity I think that you have now in Arizona, where you live now as a retiree, where you've got this writers group, right? So that's probably a really good way for you to expand your thoughts in the community, isn't it?
Yes, it's been vital. But living in a community like this, there's so many activities and things that you can get involved in.
Yes.
You name it, they've got it. So if you're a bored retiree, that's on you for sure. But yeah.
So it's an interesting journey that you've taken, and you've now landed in authoring. So I have to confess that it's something that I've done also myself, and I can relate to that. I suppose it's not a confession, is it? It's a badge of honor, honestly. If you've been able to write a book or two, that is a badge of honor in the sense that it is hard work. So I absolutely applaud you, and it's such a good thing. So tell us a little bit about, writing your book. What were the things that stand out for you? Not so much the content. I mean, I love people to go and read that, but as a person, what was it for you to do that?
As I said, both my parents have passed away. And in a sense, it was like I felt that their legacy needed to be documented in some way. So it wasn't just my story that I told. I brought them into it, and how they met and what their lives were back then. It was like a voyage back into the past. And I honestly hadn't thought about my childhood for decades. But once I started, getting back to those childhood memories, like about the sinking sand and the snakes, it was like an avalanche. And I felt like I was just getting to know myself again and putting all the pieces together, and just, giving it the recognition that it deserved. It is rewarding, but it is hard work. I do everything myself. I self-publish. I do all my own marketing and the sales, but I do love that kind of work, the graphics and that kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm itching to do it again, and I've got ideas for another 2 books already, both of which are rooted in South Africa. But I'm holding off from jumping in, until I get Spilling the Beans kind of on its way, where it's running. But now I actually feel like I have a full-time job with this book.
Yeah.
But I'm productive, I'm not just, being lazy and not active. And it's
I've
been a
heard that
wonderful experience.
from someone before that, writing books is that because you have all this information that sits in your head, and when you're able to get it out and write it down, it makes space for more. And that's probably why you say now, well, I've got 2 more books, because you've now created the space for the others. But so maybe we've not had, been anybody from America here. So it's been so cool talking to you. But I'd like to know, what advice would you give anybody else considering, going overseas, go and make a life in America? What are the things that you would say to them? Maybe what is it that you can expect to see there that you didn't think that would be there, and it would make it difficult for you? What would that be?
I would definitely urge them to have employment waiting for them before they get here. Don't be like me and just arrive and, go work in a coffee shop. Have definite employment with benefits lined up. Medical is very expensive here. So you definitely would want to have a job with those kind of benefits. That would definitely be the big thing. I think it's a lot more difficult to the immigration process to get into America these days than it was maybe back then. So definitely work with a good immigration attorney. I did all my own paperwork and things on my own. I didn't have the resources to hire a lawyer, but get someone who understands the immigration and, and all the laws of getting them in here for sure.
And on the learning side, just from how to assimilate in the country, things that you would recommend people to do, to look out for?
Well, the big thing is that our qualifications in South Africa are meaningless when we come here. Whether you're a pharmacist, teacher, whatever. You need to look into that if you want to continue on those career choices, because you will have to probably get relicensed and recertified if you're going to stay in those fields. You can't just walk in here and expect to be at the level you were back home. I mean, I went from a really nice job back to grassroots, making coffee, being like the underling in the office, and it was tough.
Yeah. So Tania, I want to giving you. I mean, we kind of almost at the end now, but I said to you I'll come back to your book, and I want to give you maybe the opportunity to tell us a little bit about your book and tell us where people can find it, and of course, like a salesperson, I'll play it back to you why they should buy it. Right? Tell us why.
Well, so this is the book, The Secrets We Keep, Spilling the Beans.
That looks quite a substantial book. How many pages are that?
300.
Oh,
but it's a decent sized font.
For us older people, right?
Yes, I didn't want to say that. You said it. So the book is published through Amazon, and I have a contract with them currently. So there is the paperback, the hardcover, and there is the digital version for the Kindles and those kind of apps. And then this summer, I was most excited to actually work with some great South African talent in South Africa to record my book as an audiobook.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, so that's my next big launch. It's actually all completed. I'm just waiting now. It's under review for quality assurance, that sort of thing. And so the audiobook will be coming out on Amazon in the next week or so. But yes, it was great working with South African talent and a South African sound producer who just knew how to manipulate everything and get it sounding good.
And just a synopsis from your side, why should people think about that's important to get for them in their cupboard here?
In their library. Well, a lot of people are curious about South Africa. So I believe people will be interested reading about how life was back then. In the book, I use a number of timestamps to kind of verify my authenticity. Features like the death of Princess Diana, like what was I doing at the time, 9/11, COVID, even back to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, when TV came to South Africa.
Probably Greece as well, right?
Yes. I'll have to go back and write a chapter on that. But my book, I think will relate to my story about the challenges, the difficulties, homesick, being a bit sad. And then people who've, maybe felt depressed, lost, alone, they can find comfort in the book and they can see that there is hope. Okay, there's always hope. You've just got to find it and have the grit and determination to move on. So the book itself it's uplifting, and it also does talk about topics that people are uncomfortable speaking about, and that will help some people who just feel, you've got to keep everything inside. But it's okay to talk about those things. That will actually help you heal. So, as I said, I've had people come up to me and say, I really related to your book story. It's just, and people say, we cried. You made us cry. And I'm like, well, then it's really working, but it's not, it's funny, it's sad, it's a mixture of emotions. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I wish you all the best with that, and getting your story out there, which is, I suppose, Ben, maybe over to you, but this is something similar we're trying to do, is to get the stories recorded, and we probably got about 100 and we probably got about 15, 16 or 20 hours worth of stories now already. And we felt like we started yesterday, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yep, in a small way, we're trying to do the same thing. And, it's just interesting when you said it, when Anton and I started, we said, oh, well, if it's useful to one person coming to Australia and they can take something out of it or learn something out of it, or at least just feel that they're not alone. Other people's gone through this thing as well. And it's quite normal to have that struggles in the beginning. And throughout, but then it's worth it, so it was good to hear you say that as well. And ultimately, look, we're just very, very glad you came on board. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Been lovely chatting to you both and sharing my life.
Yes. No, thank you, Tania. I really appreciate it. And as I say, from both of us, all the best. And it's been great to talk to you all the way from Arizona. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.